Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 375, and today's guest is Becca Xiong, Managing Director of Programs and Engagement at Harvard Innovation Labs. Becca is a serial entrepreneur with the rare experience of having success in both consumer and B2B products. She was a co-founder of an early social networking startup called Going.com, which was acquired by AOL. And then she went with her fellow co-founder, Roy Rodenstein, to start SocMetrics, a social insights platform for marketers that was also acquired. This combination of experiences makes Becca the perfect leader for the Harvard iLab, where 1 in 9 students across all the schools under the Harvard umbrella are a member of the iLab. Since its founding in 2011, the iLab has supported over 6,000 ventures that have gone on to raise over $8 billion in funding, including unicorns like Whoop, Shield AI, Mark 43, Lightmatter, and others. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like Becca's background story and establishing her entrepreneurial roots at MIT, the full story of Going.com, including raising funding from General Catalyst and Highland Capital, plus scaling the company, SocMetrics and the differences between building a B2B platform versus consumer products, the transition from founding companies to supporting entrepreneurs, all about the Harvard iLab and how it supports students, lots of startup advice, including how to use ChatGPT for the mom test, and so much more. Okay, quick side note. We have some exciting news to share here at VentureFizz. We recently launched a whole new design of our website with new features and improved functionality. Plus, we have a new home for the VentureFizz podcast where you can filter episodes based on guest, industry, stage, and topics. Check it all out at venturefizz.com. All right, without further ado, here is my interview with Becca. Becca, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Happy to be doing this. Thank you, Keith.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you. I was like a kid in a candy store doing my prep for this conversation because
Oh,
I am so excited to talk about your entrepreneurial journey because there are companies that I remember so well.
mm,
And obviously the work you're doing now at the Harvard iLab is amazing. So we're going to talk about that. And
okay.
I thought to kick things off, I thought it'd be perfect to kind of talk about something that you've seen things at such a different scale from
Yes.
starting your own companies, building, having an exits, and then all the students and companies that have come through the iLab. So I thought it'd be,
Yeah.
just good to kind of just start things off with what are those common mistakes that you see time and time again with entrepreneurs that just
Sure.
continue to be made?
Yeah. Great. So first of all, we have a lot of students here, like 3,000 students coming to the iLab every year. And what happens, we went from very small focus on advanced teams to gradually going more and more earlier because it demands so much. So 2 years ago, we opened up to explorers who are brand new to entrepreneurship, just getting started. And I actually signed myself up to the Explorer Advisor about a year ago because there's so much demand. So I'm constantly in those weekly group office hours with our students, and I hear their journey, right? So the number one thing I spend my time on is how to reel people back from wanting to just, I got a great idea, I'm going to go build. So I'm like, how do we get them back to actually talking to customers, figure out what's their need, because I know what's going to happen next. They're going to spend all this time, energy, this passion. I've had it. I've been through it. And they're going to build it, and like nobody comes. Like, it's the worst place to be. So I'm all about how to help people like figure out a better way to do that and how to like talk to people about that, because I want to put that in their head early on, not just like I'm repeating the stuff from Lean Startup or what everybody else's strategy, but like just I feel the pain, and I know all these entrepreneurs who've done it have felt the pain of that. So how do we help people be smarter? So that's like my number one mistake that I see students do, that I still spend so much time and energy and still trying to figure out how to talk to people that in that vein well.
Yeah, it's so true. Especially, I think students, right? Or they want to build something, and it's like, what should I build? And they're exploring ideas, and they're just like, well, that sounds good, sure, but is it a pain? Is it something people actually want to spend money on? It's like, so it's just, yeah, that's a great point. So talk to customers, make sure it's something worth building.
A couple other things is we also at iLab we see a lot of students who are not necessarily business school students, right? We do have a lot of those, but also people who are not business students. So they come into it, they love what they do, right? So the storytelling though needs more help. So how do you tell that story? So a lot of times like from med school and other people have so much expertise in their area. So the story comes out it's like all science, and it's hard for people to understand what that's about. So I'm working with people a lot. I'm telling that story clearly, telling that story well. So it's like less about being accurate and more about a clear, clean story that anybody can understand. So that's the other part. Like I try to work with students quite a bit about. Yeah.
And I feel like I've been on this mission about the storytelling piece because it
Yeah.
just has been coming up a lot. So the event that we hosted, it came up where Tosit, who founder of Tollbit, they've raised a lot of money, and he talked about his journey about the
Yeah.
first few times people weren't understanding kind of why they were solving this problem, what was
Mm-mm.
the overall big picture that because they're starting out here, but this is a huge problem. So he talked about that iteration of getting to that point where investors started leaning in, and then it was like a frenzy for raising capital.
Oh,
And
geez.
then beyond just being able to tell a story for fundraising, it goes so much further from recruiting customers, partners. I mean, your story is your company to a large extent. Obviously, you got to have a product too, but and your team.
Yeah, and it's not just for fundraising. So people would think about it's about making pitches to investors, but it's telling that story to everybody, your employees, your customers. Everybody needs to understand what you do. So yes, storytelling is another part we spend a fair bit of time with students on.
That's great because it's so important.
Yep.
All right, let's rewind the clock.
Mhm.
So where did you grow up? What were you like as a child?
Sure, yes. I grew up in China, in Shanghai. It's a big city, millions of people. And I came to America when I was 11, so settled in Oakland, California. Very diverse environment, so it's a bit of like a culture shock for sure. And growing up in an inner city, going to school, it's like it's very different here. So that was definitely a big learning curve. And then went to undergrad at Berkeley before coming to MIT for my graduate studies. Yeah.
And why did you decide to study computer science?
A couple of things. My dad was into computer science. No, he was a visiting scholar at Berkeley. He was also kind of entrepreneurial, so I have a bit of that in me. And then it's science and math, especially an immigrant. It felt like something like I could do well, so I got into that. I remember I had a great high school teacher who was into like an English teacher and English and history. I was interested in that, but I would go to college, read those books, and go like, I just don't have much to say. And he's like, I remember the professor's like, oh, the more you read, the more you have stuff to say. I'm like, I still don't have much to say. So I stuck with the other side. Yeah.
All right, what did you work on when you were pursuing your PhD at MIT?
So I had a bunch of twists and turns in that journey. I started out landed an AI lab. Back then, AI lab was very different from what it is now today. Before switching over to Lab for Computer Science, working with Professor Seth Teller, who's in graphics. So I started out like thinking about more theory and trying to do theory sort of stuff, but I quickly realized my interest is actually a lot more having to do with the interface, the people part. So I went from theory to graphics, which is producing stuff for visual needs with other people to see, um, to to more about the interface itself and end up in the media lab. So I was in a group called Sociable Media before the days of actually Facebook, if you can imagine that. So it was a bit ahead of its time.
Okay, so we're going to see how that parlays into your entrepreneurial
Yes,
journey soon.
sure,
So
sure,
how did
sure.
you get your career started before that, though?
So, couple of things. First of all, MIT is very entrepreneurial, right? Everywhere you go, people are always doing startups and so forth. But my first internship was actually at a startup with HBS folks, Harvard Business School folks. It was with James Courier, all right? Now from MFX and all that. But back then, he was doing a startup called eMode, which is about personality tests, because I think he had exposure to that during business school, and he wanted to bring that to the world. So we were doing personality tests backed by PhDs. Um, but as we work on it more, things are, the usual entrepreneur journey, right? It's like you think you have this thing that people want, but do people really want it, right? Um, and it wasn't doing so great. It wasn't hitting the marks. And eventually, James like, okay, I do what I really do every time we hit this, fuck it, I'm going to do the thing I hate, but it's going to work. And he's like, what do people like? Babies, cats, and dogs. So it became, what kind of a test for what kind of cat are you? And of course, it took off from there, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so true.
So, yeah, so a couple of years ago, I brought him back to come speak to our students, because I think it's interesting because, at Harvard and at MIT, there's so many people who want to do good. They have a passion about solving a problem in the world, but is that doing good going to translate to actual value, solving a real problem in the world? So, I think it's good for him because he came from that background with that experience to share with our students.
I'm laughing because
Yeah.
there was a point in time with VentureFizz that I had writers, and they were spending a lot of time writing something that was magnificent and so excited to click publish, and it would be like crickets.
Yeah.
Yet we would publish a slideshow of office pets, and it would be like rocket ship,
I
like
know.
those page views were through the roof.
Right. So as an entrepreneur, you're always like, well, which way should I go, right? That's a real
Hmm.
dilemma sometimes. And I do
Yeah.
talk with students here who are like, well, I found a business opportunity, but I'm just not passionate about it. And what do you do then? So, yeah.
All right. So what did you do after that?
After that, I actually, my first startup was with three Harvard Business School MBAs. They came looking for me, looking for co-founder, right? This is the same story I often hear at HBS students looking for tech co-founders. They came to me, they were pitching the idea. I'm like, okay, but this is what I'm working on for my PhD thesis. I think this could be interesting. They go, your idea is better. So we started working on this idea together. But of course, it's like the dot-com bust, right? So nothing was taking off. So these HBS MBAs, they're smart. They're like, okay, I think I should go get a job. And
Wait. So what was the company? What was the idea that
oh, it was
they
like
had and then you had?
utilizing my PhD research. So my
Hmm.
PhD research about like how do you visualize virtual spaces to help enhance interactions online. So yeah, so I was doing visualizations, real-time visualizations, and yeah, helping people to make interactions. So remember, I'm always interested in people, interactions. And back then, when we were reading about how to enhance these interactions, there wasn't much about that, like virtual interaction. So we're reading more like books about like architectural space design, but translate some of these ideas to virtual spaces. So like early on, I learned what interests people in some is other people. So that's like how do you use visualization to show some of that to enhance interaction.
Now the dot-com bust,
Yeah.
this idea doesn't take shape. So
All
what
right.
did you do next?
So I got a job. So I started working at Alumni, another MIT startup. It's like around here, it's like all entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship all the time, right? So you can always find someone doing something interesting. Yeah.
All right, and then you had another startup, Data Power, which I remember.
Yeah. Yep. Data Power. I work for Eugene Kuznetsov, another MIT guy, brilliant. So I learned a lot from him as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that company went on to get acquired by IBM.
Mhm. That's right.
Okay, so what finally got you to the point where, okay, now I'm gonna start my own company? Is it something that you always like? You talked about your dad was entrepreneurial, so in the
Yeah.
back of your head, did you
Yes.
think you were gonna start something? Yeah, okay.
So it was always like, oh, maybe we should start, getting together with friends and do some brainstorm. So I was doing that with Roy Rodenstein, who actually went to MIT Media Lab with me, and so we were group mates in that sociable media group. Also coming out of that group was Dana Boyd. You might remember her as no, maybe not, as the people was like the MySpace people are different from the Facebook people. So she kind of write about the differences there. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so what were you thinking? Just starting
Oh,
the
yes.
idea, to get the
This is what
company
I always
going.
tell students too. Like when you're thinking about ideas, you should see what problems you have in real life. So Roy and I were bouncing together ideas. Like we're both doing like internet dating and thought it was like terrible experience. Should we do something in dating? But related to that is like dates. Like what do you do for with your date? And finding out stuff to do seems kind of hard. And gathering that information we thought could be helpful to people, like us, but also everyone else there, because it's so fragmented. You had to search to find what to do. So what about that problem? It's like information. We could gather that. We're we're two MIT people. Like, I think we can gather that pretty easily. So that's why we started thinking about, can we do something around events, bringing people together, and there's also a community aspect afterwards. And when I started that, I remember building that. This was still when I was working at Data Power. I talked to Eugene, he's another entrepreneur. I was like, is it okay if I just do this thing on the side? He goes, yeah, just do your job and do this thing on the side. So in the summer, we worked on it. And that's the thing like I told my students, right? Like the first thought is always like, I have an idea, I'm gonna build it. So build it over the summer, and it was like not picking up so much. And then I remember we had like a birthday party. So I had a birthday party. I was living on 100 Memorial Drive. Like I have a place like with a balcony with a nice view of the city, right? So friends would just actually climb up over the fence and join my apartment, and like it's a fun time. So and then I realized afterwards, all these friends I've been telling to use the site actually signed up, because after the party they want to know who's who and they want to make connections. And then I realized, oh, this is how we can grow, is get people together physically, and then they connect after virtually. That physical and virtual connection together works really well.
Right, because the first, like, the company originally was called Hey, Let's Go.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, because obviously you had the early innings of social media. You had MySpace.
Yeah.
Facebook was just starting to come out of colleges, right? It existed.
I think they just moved to the Bay Area, started to grow bigger. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the early innings of social media.
Yeah.
And I just think it's fascinating that, and this goes back to your research of actually getting people together, right? Get away from the screen, get away from your phone later, and get together and do things together. So,
right.
Yeah. So, how did you meet Jeff Meningay? How did you meet your third co-founder?
The third co-founder, it was Roy's friend. He was here for the summer. I was like, oh, do you want to? Right? It's like that's how you do startups. You pull in friends of friends, and like get started that way. Yeah.
All right. Well, building a consumer company, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about you threw a party, and that kind of like
kicks things
had some light bulbs going off.
Yes.
Because from what I gathered, Roy did a podcast way back with Mixergy, which is something I just remember listening to way back in the day, and I'm like, oh, this is gold. So this helped me prepare. So you were very aggressive with your guerrilla marketing. It wasn't buying Facebook ads, because that really wasn't a thing you could do then, or Google ads, right? That wasn't.
We realized we're like three geeks, right? Like me from MIT, Roy's from MIT, and then Jeff was his buddy. They went to Georgia Tech before together. It's like, what do three nerds know about parties, right? So we know we had to do something, and we had to go out there and really hustle to get this thing done, right? We're not gonna sit around and wait for things to happen. So what we found, we tried a bunch of stuff, like we tried postering, we tried pestering people at Boston Common. We tried everything. What worked was like we found out it's by partnering up with people who already have communities. So we did stuff for like Boston Young Professional Association and other kinds of, the Boston Skis and Scores Club. But just what are the local groups that already have community? We want to tap into that. And we do events, use our tool to do some of the RSVPs. That's how it started growing. So we do like regular parties to get things out. So that's how it grew. And pretty soon we got like thousands of members, and it started to look interesting,
And you did this, from what I gathered, a Fenway Fest, which ended up being crazy, right? Like, because you had all these people showing up, and then Fenway almost had to cancel on you, or something. Like, I had to move the date.
It was like, oh, I'm writing the tea, and there's like an ad from us. Oh my gosh, wow, that's amazing. So it was a huge party. I think like 5,000 people. It also feels good because like not only are we working on our startups, but we're really building a community. We're giving back to the community, and it's something fun, something engaging, something they can tell their friends about. Like I think when I look back on my career, community is something I'm always passionate about, and to see people getting together, to see like they're my friends who met at these things and got married afterwards. Like just like people always have that need to be together, right? Like, after pandemic, I feel that even more keenly, right? This need that we all have. So I enjoy doing that, doing a startup that, I feel is doing some good for the world. Yeah.
Well, the theme that I always hear from the best entrepreneurs that I talk to on this podcast is they do the hustle, the legwork of that customer interaction early
Yeah.
on, like you were doing in Boston Commons or throwing a party. Whether it's B2B software, like Florian from Vidya
Yeah.
Health, he was going to dental offices and asking
Yeah.
them, well, how are you? So he did that door to door
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
understand the customer pain points to
Uh-huh.
go build something worthwhile.
Yeah, I know them from when I was working at MIT. So,
Oh,
they.
you know Florian? Yeah, he's
Yeah.
amazing. He's
Yeah.
amazing. Yes.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is true or not. So if it's not, we can edit this out.
Mhm.
But did Hey Let's Go apply to be part of the first Y Combinator
Oh,
class?
yes, we did. We sure did. Yes. Uh,
And you didn't get accepted.
oh, no, we didn't get accepted. It is tricky, right? To get an events, social network. There's like online, there's offline. It's a little complicated. Maybe that was what it was. So we didn't get in, but we knew those guys, Houston and others. Alex,
Alexis from like Reddit was
yeah,
in
yeah,
that class.
yeah. So a lot of folks were in there, and we were hanging out there. And later on, we heard from program, maybe we made a mistake there. So there's, yeah. So yeah, those were the good old days. Yeah, like a lot of innovation coming at that time. Not just about doing the startups, but how to do startups, and that's very exciting to see.
Yeah, no, it was a great time. And for people that don't know, like the first Y Combinator class was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it
Yes,
had Reddit, and there was multiple classes before it went full time to the Bay
yes,
Area. But
yes, exactly. Right.
all right, so how did you rebrand to going.com and how did you
Sure.
like buying that domain now would be impossible, but back
Oh,
then what
right,
was it
right.
like?
Yeah. People always said that, hey, let's go. The name is kind of long, and there's like a let's go travel guide, which can be confusing. But I kind of like it. Early, we had this red, blue, green logo for the hey, let's go part. I mean, I think it's kind of like has an energy, like grassroots energy kind of thing. But we knew, it's hard to pronounce, hard to remember, and because it's longer. So after we got investment, so we did get investment from Highland Capital and General Catalyst, and we had on our board Bob Davis and George. So like the two heavyweights who both ran, $5 billion companies. That made for some, fireworks and interesting conversation at our board meetings. So, but we do have that more resources, to do things, and that's when we made the switch to on the name change, so to call it going.com. And we had a guy, Sanjay, who's from New York. You can tell he's from New York. So our CEO is Evan. He's based in Boston, but our marketing guy is from New York. And uh, he's they're not nerds like me and my two co-founders. They're more nightlife, and they understand that part of the world. So they were going for like, going.com looks cool. It has a little more retro kind of like design for the going.com. Cool. So that's what how we pivoted to that. Yeah. And yes, that domain we had to buy. I remember back then it was 100K, which sounds like a lot of money,
Wow.
but
But
now
now
it's like a deal. Yes, to buy that domain. Yes.
that is amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so you raised capital from General Catalyst and
yeah,
Highland.
yeah,
You had George Bell and Bob Davis,
yeah, yeah.
two, Internet 1.0 legends
Right,
on
right,
your
right, right.
board.
Yes.
So, like, where did it go from there? Like, how did you grow? Like, to what point did it get to before the acquisition?
Right, right. So I remember other things. A couple of things. One, we had a VP of sales fairly early on because Evan's like, oh, gotta figure out what the revenue model is. So he would talk to brands about what we do, and they're like, oh, you're capturing young people, and we're not so good at capturing young people. We are interested. We're interested. There's a lot of people who are interested, but it turns out they're not really interested until we hit a certain scale. So for the first year, we were doing sales, but trying to do sales, but the brands were just not interested. So there's like a lot of wasted time. It wasn't until we hit a million members, that becomes sizable and interesting. And want to be in multiple cities, so not just Boston, but 5 different big cities like New York, San Francisco, LA, Chicago, etc. So that's how we grew. Some of the things that I think back about is, because we got investment, we might have grown a bit too fast before we really figure out how to go deep in a particular city. So, so there's things like we probably should spend a bit more time figuring out how to grow in Boston. But this is a little bit open to debate because Boston has its own specific, like we found, Chicago, LA, so like it takes off more easily, right? Versus Boston, there's more conservatism, but there's also young people. So every location has its own quirks. And the way to grow, we found out, is actually a bit different from city to city. So those are the early days of trying to figure this out. And then when we hit that scale, then brands are interested. So then we get like the Millers want to do a party with us, and a United Music Group that did an investment with us because we hit a scale that becomes interesting to them. So that's learning, right? Like when do you think about revenue? Are you just burning cycles, talking to people, or not? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So eventually it was acquired by AOL, and there was a press release that I dug up, and it was Tim Armstrong talking.
Yes. Yes.
As CEO of AOL at the time.
Yeah. He was a founding CEO. So this is his a purchase between us and Patch to have a local strategy. Right. He was looking for new CEO needs something to hang their hats on, and this is what it was. Yeah.
And he was like, we're going to ramp up our local presence with Going.com, Patch, to combine with our strong brand, MapQuest. Which I was a MapQuest user, so I'm not knocking it. It was an amazing product. I would print out the directions and drive. It's just a fun look back. So, all right. So, what did you do after that?
Yeah. So I was working at AOL for a bit, but corporates like that didn't sit too well with me. So I got a little bored, and Roy did too. So we started afterwards brainstorming again about what to do. And once again, it's things that you go through in your real life. Like that's where the ideas, come up. So we were talking. I remember we were sitting in a restaurant talking with our other friend, like mentor friend, Coach, who did 2 B2B SaaS startups. Sold one to VMware, I think. So he's like, as doing a startup, it's kind of hard to figure out how to get the word out. Like, who are the influencers? It takes a lot of digging. This is what 2010, 2011 maybe. So it takes a lot of effort to find who are these influencers, and it'd be nice if you can do something about that. So we're like, oh, okay, that seems like a problem. It's us techies. We have these problems that I think naturally think about like, hey, I think I can solve this problem. So that's what started SocMetrics. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So, and it became a social insights platform for marketers. Yeah. So now you're B2B.
Yes. Well, B2C, getting customers, getting users, it takes a lot of work, right? It took us a while to get to like 1 million, become interesting to brands and so forth. Whereas like starting to business, it maybe can go faster, to talk to, actually we started first, build a prototype, talk to startups and find out startups want it, but somewhat. And then it's actually the PR agencies and brands that wanted more. So that's how, with startups, you always have these pivots. Yeah.
Well, we think of influencers now, right? Like it's like core to our society. Yes. But back in 2012, that wasn't like, that wasn't a thing per se. So how were you finding people that had the most Twitter followers, or like, how was that point of influence? Because I don't know, like there wasn't like YouTubers yet, or was there? I can't remember.
Yeah. So it was funny. I remember talking to our friends about it. Like, oh, we don't need another like Twitter analytics company. And then it became what we do. It's Twitter analytics. So don't ever knock other people's ideas because you never know. So we looked at a bunch of things. It's like like I think it's a pretty complicated algorithm, but like 30 different metrics that we look at, and then we weigh to see like what actually matters. So it's a pretty complex algorithm, but it's looking at all their footprints on social media and how they tweet, how frequent tweet, how much people respond to them. All those things feed into the algorithm. Yeah.
And then you were working with amazing brands like
Yeah.
Adidas and Neiman Marcus, Game Show
Yeah.
Network, Force
Oh,
Factor.
right.
So,
Yeah.
and it's how did you get Rich Miner to invest?
Yeah. So, this is the, Boston MIT ecosystem, right? So Roy did more of that work, but just in the ecosystem, these are people who we see, quite often. And of
Hmm.
course, we're in the business of information and information gathering. Who's the big player in the space? It's Google. So having Google Ventures backing us was definitely very helpful. Yeah.
And you had CRV and Dharma
Yeah.
Shah and obviously others.
Yes. Yes.
So what did you learn building more that B2B analytics
Yeah. Yeah.
platform versus consumer?
Yeah. So, uh, I, so we start out doing like social media influencers and more overall more to helping brands understand their customers better. What are the footprints of their users on Twitter, on Facebook, etc. I think what we learned is companies that were at very different stages when it comes to being able to use that social data or use data to personalize at all. I remember there was this one company, I don't want to name them, but like they're a big apparel company. And uh, but if you sign up, it doesn't matter if you're men or women, you get the same newsletter. So their ability to personalize is very basic. So, we have our sales guy, Timmy D, signing up, and he get the maxi dress today, and they're just like, so even baseline, like men, women having different emails they weren't really doing. And so we did a test with, I think, Johnny Cupcake, a local brand.
Hmm.
What happens if you do male, female personalization? You get like a 30% lift. Just off the bat, it's like, okay, this didn't require a lot of like machine learning or anything fancy. It's just so you have people like that at one end, and you have people like Neiman Marcus, where they're like, okay, don't tell us anything, just give us the data. We'll tell you if your data is useful. So, so the range in what people do with additional data in terms of personalization was huge. So we had to go from like, oh, we gave you the data to make things better, but then there's only Neiman Marcus who can use us, to for the rest of these brands, we have to figure out what works for them. So we got more into giving them ways to personalize based on where they are. So that's a learning. Like a lot of times, entrepreneurs start out thinking, "I want to do X," and you face the reality of people just not at the level of X. You think you can be helpful, and what do you do to provide the gap? I mean, but this happens also with Alchemy, right? They were trying to sell their algorithm to ISPs. Now, and the ISPs like, what am I going to do with that? So they have to create their own content network to make things work. Yeah.
Yeah, so true. All right, so what was the outcome?
So we did that. So we worked on that for a while, and go through high peaks, and then somewhat okay. So it dragged down for a while, and eventually it was sold, and Roy and I end up doing different things. Yeah. That's when I'm like, okay, well, I learned a lot from doing startups, and maybe it's time to do something different, such as supporting startups. And that's how I end up at MIT, working on connecting corporates to startups, because I went through that journey myself and see how valuable it is, to have Universal Music Group investing us as a venture. So have that kind of corporate investment is very helpful, as well as having those corporate customers, partnerships were hugely helpful. So I started working at MIT, which has this pretty interesting program called Industry Liaison Program. They started back in the end of World War II, helping to connect corporates to first MIT, because they were working together during a war effort, and they saw the impact of innovation. And then they go like, well, war's over, but we still need this, So then build into kind of like a membership program for corporates, and it had like a lot of large corporates like the Apple, Boeing, Samsung, Merck, Shells of the world as its members. So connecting them to MIT, but then nowadays they realize a lot of innovation is happening first of all in the startups, and the cycle is much shorter. So they became very interested in MIT startups. So we were making connections between them and about 2,000 MIT startups, most alumni startups.
I didn't know that program existed. Like, so this is called the MIT Startup Exchange.
Yeah, MIT Startup Exchange. It's part of, it's a sister program to MIT Industry Liaison.
And how did you find like you go from building to now supporting entrepreneurs? So like how did that feel as far as that transition to a different type of role and different mindset?
Yeah, I think it was, I think I'm a people person, I'm a community person, right? So when I help make those connections and it works, it's very fulfilling, right? Because I know how meaningful that connection can be for a startup, right? We have startups coming to us, they're like, the professor's calling me like, oh, the things are not working well. The co-founder left, and we're really trying to push this. Can you help? It's like a classmate of mine from MIT, and we're like, oh, learn more about your startup. What does it do? Wow, fascinating. Let's connect you to some of the corporates. And it went from almost not doing well, like on its last ropes, to like a very successful startup that was well received, got into like or Stacks 25, best 25 startups. And really took off from both the customers, the venture funding, hugely helpful.
All right, so you've been with the Harvard iLab now for over 4 years, I think.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So managing director, VentureFizz has been involved with the iLab for years and years and years, and just such an amazing program that was set up. And I forget when it originated, but
yeah, I can tell you.
Talk about the iLab in terms of the history and kind of where it's at now.
Sure. So we started in 2011. First of all, when I come working at Harvard, everybody told me, oh, Harvard, every tub has its bottom. I'm like, what does that mean? So every school does its own thing, yeah. But Harvard iLab is unique in that from the start, it was meant to be one Harvard. It was part of like President Drew Faust's initiative for one Harvard. So so much that the deans of every school sits on our advisory board. We meet with them twice a year. So I think it's unlike MIT, where entrepreneurship is everywhere. Like there's like 85 different units working on entrepreneurship, including MIT Stock Exchange, but also everybody else. To coming to Harvard, where they have the luxury of designing it later, designing it well. So iLab is really like the innovation hub for all of Harvard. So when it started out, there's still the question of, we built it, would people come, right? So how did they get started? They were focusing on the later stage teams that really is trying to accelerate the best teams to success. So Whoop came out of that, well-known unicorn that has an office downtown in Kenmore Square, and others. But over time, what we find is there's so many students interested in entrepreneurship and innovation. We just keep going earlier and earlier. So right before the pandemic, we started going to any teams who have an idea. Let's help them work on their idea. And of course, with the pandemic, everything going virtual, that help us scale, I think the changes in that during the pandemic, there's a lot of changes. It makes it a great environment for people to think about, for example, EdTech, right? The education schools started a degree program, it's like a one-year master's on entrepreneurial leadership. And we see a whole bunch of education school students. So it sort of grew as the schools and people's interest grew in entrepreneurship and innovation. The other part is like, I think it's just what's in this generation's like DNA. Like they are all about like doing their thing and making an impact. So what we see is, so like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, right? We grew also to people who don't even have an idea yet. They're just exploring. They're curious. They want to know about entrepreneurship. So we grew to like 3,000 members, which is huge. That's like 1 in 9 Harvard students. I mean, like degree seekers.
That is amazing.
Yeah. People don't usually think of Harvard as entrepreneurial, but it really is. Like this is the thing. Like alumni always want us to tell people. Like it is changing. I think the young people today, the brilliant young minds, are changing, and they really want to roll up, sleep, and do things. And we want to be able to support that.
Like I mean, I think the brand definitely speaks entrepreneurship now. Like I mean, it's just. Especially, I mean, HBS. I don't know what the percentage is there, but you've got the Harvard and HBS, like the cross-pollination of all the different schools working together, collaborating, and there's been so many great success stories that have originated across all the different schools. So it's, I mean,
Yeah, something
I
like
think the
half of HBS students, 5 or 10 years out, half of them will be running their own business. So
wow.
entrepreneur management is now like the biggest unit at Harvard Business School. And we see that
Yeah,
too. Something like 1 in 3 MBA students are also a member of the iLab.
that's
Business
phenomenal.
school obviously the biggest, but college is second. The Zuckerberg and Gates, right? In some sense, we want them to do their startups while they're in school. They don't have to leave school, drop out to do their startups. What I recommend is, I was just talking to a student yesterday about that. Um, Take a leave of absence. Give yourself options, and then at school. But there's all the other schools too. The Kennedy School, a lot of social impact ventures from there. Even Divinity School. We always say like Divinity School students, they really know their customers well. So dental school, you name it. So all medical school, a lot of great biomedical innovation because Boston's really the mecca for that.
So I saw a stat.
Mhm,
I think it's accurate. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
mhm,
this spring semester,
mhm.
the iLab is supporting more than 800 ventures.
Yes, yes.
That is amazing.
Yes, yes. And because I'm a stats person, a data person, like coming from MIT, so we try to get all that data in our Salesforce. We can have up-to-date data to do better decisions about how to support our team. Yes, that is absolutely true. The question might be, how do you support so many students, so many teams, right? So we do a couple of things to do that on that front. One, we look at where people are, because not everybody's on the same stage. We have explore stage for people who are early. Remember, I'm the explore advisor. And then we have the test stage where people are working on an idea, actively testing. And then propel stage is when they have customers already, and it's about how to get more customers, how to figure out a business model, and then pitch and get funding. So that's the 3 stages that with program offering in particular to that. And we also look at people depending on what they're working in. So we have kind of a different track cohort model, right? So we have the biggest is B2B, B2B, a lot of SaaS, but also B2B, hard tech, et cetera. And that's 35% of our teams. Then the next is B2C, so consumer startups. Then healthcare life sciences is about 10 to 15%. But I always say like they raise 40% of venture funding, so small but mighty. And there's a social impact, which varies between 20 to 25. So we have a lot of folks who want to take these things they're learning, but do great things in their community where they're from, or here in the States.
And how do you determine, you're a data person, how do you determine success? Like, is it, they graduate from the lab and actually raise capital or generate revenue for customers or
I would say we look at obviously when we report out on impact, we quote things like $8 billion raised from all the ventures, but that doesn't include the social impact ventures, right? We're still to figure out how to best measure the social impact ventures. But even more importantly, I think it's the way we think about it. It's as much about venture success or social impact success as is about education. Because these are a lot of times students' first exposure to business, first exposure to doing roll up the sleeve and do something in the real world. So they're learning a lot of skills. Something like a quarter of our explorers are actually wanting to do entrepreneurship. So they might be working in a corporate environment, but still take these concepts, right? Like some of the customer discovery and getting MVPs and so forth. You can use that to think about how to take an idea that you have and socialize it within your organization before you can put that into reality. So there's a lot of folks in coming to entrepreneurship with different angle. Maybe this is their first startup, maybe it's the first try, and it's their next startup or future startup that actually will take off. And that's totally fine with us.
so you mentioned Whoop. What are some other companies that have come through the program?
Sure, sure. There's Whoop, there's like public safety companies like Mark 43, Rapid SOS that are, at unicorn or near unicorn. I think there's like 9, 10 different unicorns coming out of the iLab. There's like Shield AI, so working on AI in the, as well as like right-hand robotics, working in robotics, Day Zero diagnostics, so in the biomedical space, Vaxxes with their smart patch for vaccination. So tons and tons of great startups that come out of the iLab in lots of different areas, as well as we're also proud of our social impact ventures, such as art lifting, right? So they're helping homeless artists sell their art, and they partner with the likes of Google and so forth. So many great ventures and so many great founders we have. Yeah.
Yeah, Art Lifting is a phenomenal company and just
Mhm.
extraordinary what they do.
Yeah.
And Love Pop is one of my favorite consumer brands that came
Oh,
out of the iLab. So
mhm. Yes.
Wambi and
Of
John
course.
are amazing entrepreneurs.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so what advice do you give to entrepreneurs on taking, a product from zero to one?
Mhm. Yeah. So one, definitely talk to customers, right? And we also talk to students about how do you go about talking to customers. A lot of mom test, a lot of and now you have AI and ChatGPT, right? You can do a lot of practice, with ChatGPT. You can ask ChatGPT for like what are different customer segments, can you be this customers and do the interview, mom test interview, and it's going to tell you how your question is that the right kind of question you should be asking, as well as give you a response like your customers. You can say,
Wait. So they're using ChatGPT for like their prompt is asking something related to their business idea and the mom test?
so you can ask ChatGPT. You can try this. Um, do a mom test interview with this type of customer with me. So then you ask questions. Like if you
What?
say, "Is this a great idea? What do you think about my idea?" It's going to say, "Well, in mom test, you're supposed to really understand what customers are thinking rather than trying to pitch. Um, so so ask about the customer, their need. And then they tell you like, oh, if the customer is, a college student, they might say that this is the response, and it looks pretty good, So you actually can. So we want people to do that, and the tools are so much better now. So you have no excuse not to do it. You can do some, practice cut interviews with ChatGPT, get good at it, and now go talk to some real people. Yeah, that's, and see. So it's both the same concept, but it's executed differently now in today's world, right? Like, yeah,
And like so how do we talked about the storytelling too, and
yeah, yeah,
like how do you work on that pitch? Like how do they,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, why them, why this market, why now, right?
Right,
Like how
right,
do you
right, right.
work on those?
Yes, yes. So I also use ChatGPT quite a bit for that too. So last Friday, was it last Friday, the one before? I helped a student with their Y Combinator pitch. They're like, "Oh, interview is coming up." I'm like, "Oh, when is it?" I thinking like it's weeks out. No, no, no. It's 1 o'clock today. So, oh, okay. So I put the deck into ChatGPT and I asked like, okay, so give me a critique of it, and it was pretty good. It was picking up stuff, same stuff I was picking up. It's like, traction needs some story, and market validation is a little. What's the market size? Like, you gotta tell a bigger, story about this. And like, okay, can you give me some interview questions, Q&As with YC for this? So I sent both of these to the student, and they're like, oh my God, this is super helpful, right? And so our conversation then afterwards, like 1 hour, we have like a half an hour advising session. Then I don't have to go to the basics. I'm like a level higher. So yeah, so we would, I asked her about ideas of how you can become a $1 billion company. If I had tools like that, I might have not failed that first YC interview, right? So how to use better tools to help them to be successful. And later on, like I heard they got in, so that's like a like full circle, right? So how,
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, use the tools. They're there. They're so
yeah, yeah,
useful. I mean, you also need to take it sometimes with a grain of salt as far
yeah,
as the
yeah,
accuracy, but it just helps with brainstorming too. Because always I'm like,
yes.
all right, what should I want to put a poll out there. What should, what are things that think people are thinking about right now? It just helps me
Yeah,
like with the idea generation. So, all
absolutely.
right, what are three apps you can't live without? Can't be Slack, email, or calendar.
Oh, right, right. Well, so meditation, I do try to meditate. Sometimes I use the app, sometimes I don't. I like Headspace. Yeah, so that's good. Social app, like I don't know. I am on WhatsApp a fair bit. And oh, that's also how I encourage students to do when they think about like MVP, right? So a lot of times people think MVP and they think I need an AI, I need like coding. I'm like, no, no, no. If you're building a community site, which we do have a lot of students here working on community things, Your first group can just be like a WhatsApp group. The barrier to entry is so much lower to get people to like download WhatsApp and join your group. If you can't do that, like don't bother building, your app and app store. Like I always ask them, when was the last time you downloaded an app? You don't do that,
That's
right?
so true, Becca.
Right?
When's the last time you downloaded it? It was like by necessity, like, oh, I need my Ticketmaster tickets.
Right? Do you ever like, oh, I'm gonna do some research or
I'm
something?
gonna browse the
Yeah,
app store and just see something fun. Now, like I remember in the early days of the iPhone, I'd be
yeah.
like, oh, like that is so funny. That's so true.
Right. And of course, ChatGPT, so that's
Hmm.
um,
Okay,
because I think you
perfect.
gotta be using better tools now because it's changing so fast. Something like 67% of our teams are using AI in their startup. I'm always like, okay, but don't just slap on AI to whatever you do, okay? That doesn't make it a successful idea. It's just a huge range, right? You got people who are doing AI hardware, right? Like etched AI, like they raise 120 million, in the first year, right? So like the pace of change is so fast that we're seeing. It takes years and years to get to a unicorn, but we have a team that's like hit unicorn status in like three years, right? So so how can you gotta be using the right tools today to stay in front of that and be thinking about that. Yeah, so that's the kind of things that's on my mind.
And how much does the iLabs help with the fundraising, like having
Right.
investors and introductions and?
Yes, yes. So there are definitely students that come to us and they want to say, okay, introduce me to investors. And I can tell you 9 out of 10, these teams are not ready, right? Like if you got an idea stage, you shouldn't be thinking about investment. It's like, okay, you got to go through that testing cycle, get customers, get tractions, because like they don't know who's worth investing in. If you can't show traction, like I tell students to think about it as like when you buy a stock, you want to know this is going to be a good investment, right? Same thing. The investors looking to do that and not trying to be like do good in the world. That doesn't quite exist. Even the impact investors, they're looking for traction. So if you don't have that, like it's hard to talk about that in meaningful ways. Then you just waste each other's time. So what we recommend teams to do is think about building an advisor network, right? These are the people who are in your space, could be very helpful in the early days to help you find customers, find these experts and influencers. So that's the kind of people you want who will grow with you. Over time, will see the progress you've made, can vouch for you, and the right time, they know who invests in their space. So that's what we work with students a lot about. That said, we do have some fundings as well. We have a Spark grant, which is designed to help people do demand validation. So what it is you use that to buy ads or pay people with like a Starbucks gift certificate for doing an interview, right? So we really want people to some small dollars, 250, 500 to do that kind of demand validation testing. And then when people are with traction, at that stage, there's other grants like Social Impact Fellowship Fund or Austin Venture Fund, which is a panel of VCs from the Boston area, but we might expand that to other VCs. As well as we have the President's Innovation Challenge. The finale is May 7th. We should showcase some of really amazing teams in that process.
So, book or podcast recommendation that you commonly suggest to entrepreneurs?
I was really blown away with Bowling Alone. For teams thinking about doing community, I saw this on somebody's book desk the other day. Bowling Alone is a great book. Talks about how all kinds of social capital in America. If you look at the charts, right, it has all this data because Harvard professor. Uh, Charts just go like this. They all go down. Why? Because uh, people are spending less time engaging with each other. It's a huge problem. And that book, it was written, came out earlier, and it talked about, the problem is TV. Can you imagine now? Our phone, AI? Oh my God, like we
It's
have
terrible.
so much more addictive technology solutions. So how to get back to people and making connection? Yeah, when I read that, I was very moved by that book. So for folks working in community, I recommend that. I don't listen to podcasts, but I will definitely listen to yours. Yes.
So we're redesigning our website that's launching
Okay.
in like a week. And the podcast is more of a focal point. It's just
Okay. Okay. Okay.
because it was kind of like something that just originated. But now I have 370 something episodes of
What?
amazing people like you. So it's got to be filterable and like I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
we'll continue to make it better and better. But anyways,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
all right. What do you do for fun outside of work?
What I do for fun? Well, one, I'm mom to two kids, so that takes up some of my time. I enjoy skiing, I enjoy meditation, but a passion of mine is probably working on our emotional health. This is what I talk to students about too. Even from the beginning, when you're building a venture, right? The reason why I think people rush to building is because they know how to build. They makes them feel good, versus going out and say, "Hey, I don't know the answer. I need to talk to customers." You have to hold that uncertainty of not knowing, which I'm like, if you're a Harvard student or MIT student, you're like, you've been right all your life, and this is how you end up at Harvard and MIT, right? To hold that uncertainty and not knowing, I think that takes quite a bit of mind shift. That, but that's the kind of like emotional growth you had to go through as a founder. So I see it there. I seeing all the founder conflict and so forth. We have a woman who's like a co-founder therapist. Just like couples counseling, there's like co-founder counseling. There's obviously there. And I was talking to one of our alumni founders. The whole entrepreneur journey is a bit like a hero's journey. You're answering the call, and there's amazing highs and lows that you have to go through. So how do you help people work on that emotional growth in that path? That's something I'm also very passionate about. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's real. It's real. There's definitely highs and lows, and you gotta
Yeah.
power through, but you gotta keep that mental state in check.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Well, Becca, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us
Of course.
through your professional background, the great companies you've built, obviously
Mhm.
all the amazing work you're doing at the iLab, and obviously all the great advice.
Yeah. Of course. Happy to do it, and thank you.